Metaverse is Web 3.0. We talk about so much about all these things, but there's so many questions which we need to answer. What will Metaverse do for us? What will do to India? How we can create job opportunities there? Will women be treated as equals in Web 3.0? Who will be able to curate social and ethic policies? It's a new world. It's time to reset and unwind. It's time to set new rules for Metaverse. All these questions will get answered today here as I bring you my next podcast guest, Alison Alexander, who's the Director of Social and Ethic Policies at Metacampus. So stay tuned, sit back and enjoy the podcast and click on subscribe button for more amazing content on Web 3.0. And
That
as
is
we
true.
progress and see how metaverse is shaping up, phone is something like a, it's going to be like a soul, kind of like a soul where
Yeah.
we keep everything and we try
Yeah.
to hide our insecurities or we try to be ourselves. So a phone gets stolen, it's really difficult to understand, for
Mm,
especially for Gen Z's, I would say. It's
yes.
you
Yeah.
know
And I
we
think that's for for baby boomers and all of those, yeah, that those that they don't Gen X, all of those, they don't get it as much because they just think it's a phone, and
Yes.
they don't use the phone in the same way as Gen Zs do.
Yes.
So they don't know what the fuss is about. When I think your words there, I really like those. They're about their insides. They're everything about them. They're their memories, they're their privacy, they're their vulnerabilities, which, as you say, does align with the difference between how people are receiving like the metaverse. So
Yes.
the different generations, um, and how they will, what they will think about it, feel about it, and how they will use it. I think they're really important points. Yeah.
And also to add to that, I wanted to ask you so many questions, but since we've come, how we've started, how you handling the ethics and social issue in Meta Campus? As I've been an avid gamer and I've seen in gaming, it's pretty bad. Like if there are people who are not able to understand. How to communicate or racism is quite
Mm,
huge in gaming.
yeah.
And when you see metaverse, it's sort of that, right? And I feel I've seen a lot of people, my friends, uh, they have left the gaming world just
Really.
because of how cruel it is,
Mm,
because while gaming there are bets or there are things going on. So when I saw ethics and social, what you
mm.
manage, it's so important that this is laid out to people, that this is being taken care of, and this is really important. uh, I mean, important part of the metaverse.
Yeah.
Maybe any brand, but it should be highlighted in such a way that people understand why it's such a important thing.
Yeah.
We are on the, like, the verge of starting those things, but if we take care of it while we start things, I mean, we will be in better shape to take this industry forward.
Yeah. Yeah, and lots of thoughts about that. So, firstly, I think that's why at Metacampus we really wanted, and the founder of Metacampus, Pera, really wanted to have that focus on social policy. And then when we were looking at that, we added ethics, because for us, social policy was about how do we really help everybody benefit from the evolving world. Yeah. Now we say that, like you've mentioned, the metaverse, we would very much say the evolving world of Web3, which encompasses everything, all of the different tools. How do we make sure that the world that is evolving is taking account of everybody that lives in this world? And therefore, for us, the concept of social policy, that's where it comes from. Yeah, social policy is about how do people behave and how do they think, and therefore, how do we make sure that we're thinking about all of that, not just in the products that we create, but also in how we use those to affect lives. Yeah. And for me, that's where then ethics came in when we were having those conversations, because it is a new world. Yeah. Whichever way we look at it, Web3 is giving us new tools in which allows us to operate in a different way. And the minute you bring new things in, there has to be an element or a discussion about ethics, because
Right.
if we can't say all the kind of legislation or regulation that we apply today will apply in the new world. Now, we want to not create new regulation or legislation because that takes time and it allows
Right.
for what you said, actually inappropriate behaviours to develop. But actually, we have to at least acknowledge it's different. And then when we acknowledge that, we have to say, what solutions do we need to apply to it? Is it the current regulations we can just bring in, or do we have to think of new things? But coming to your point of people leaving the gaming world because of racism or their feelings around what's happening, for me, as we talked, I'm someone at the other end. I'm like in my 50s. And when I was in my 20s or even in my teens, I thought that we kind of stamped out racism and sexism and homophobia, like, because that's what we did. And
Right.
but actually, we haven't. I think at a time you think, right, we go on marches, we go on rallies, legislation comes in, and actually we think it's changed. But actually, what I'm really acutely aware of is that it hasn't. And as the world evolves and we get Web3 and the Metaverse, there is so much conversation in all of that about how women are feeling, how women of color are feeling, how women are not being funded as much to develop new startups. There's so many conversations. In some sense, it disheartens me that it feels like we've come so little on that journey of making this a much more fairer and equal world, where 20 years ago, I thought that we had all those struggles and that we had really progressed. And now I see ourselves, and I think we have progressed in many ways. So I'm not saying we haven't, but actually, because we've got a new world evolving, nobody's applied the rules to that world. So we're
Right.
actually starting to see people are raising concerns that actually behaviours in those worlds are not what we would expect. And
Right.
which then brings us back to the point that we haven't actually changed attitudes and behaviours. Because if
Right.
we had changed attitudes and behaviours, as we got new tools, we wouldn't find some of those old issues coming up.
Definitely.
And that's for me a sad point, that for kind of 3 generations we've felt that we've kind of been changing. And in the world where I've worked, we've seen lots of changes. But it's the hearts and minds, isn't it? It's only when you really change hearts and minds do you then see different behaviour. And so for me, I mean, when we first talked, you asked me, like, why did I come into this world? Like, why even engage in Web3, the Metaverse? For me, it was for that very point, that I think when I spoke to Pera, he and I talked, and I saw that there was a real opportunity to equalise society
Right.
by removing bias. If we can use all the tools of, I mean, we're sitting here as people, but some people might do this podcast as avatars. So you would never know. Yes, you might know the gender from the voice or ethnicity through voices, but actually you wouldn't know a lot. And
Right.
actually, by all of those tools, for me, I actually felt that you could start to change the world and
Definitely.
really change it, and especially financially. I feel the whole Web3 gives us an opportunity to rebalance the finances. And it was that one thought that made me go, oh, I really want to get into this. I read a great article about actually you no longer would get paid for the country you lived in or the education that you'd done. You'd get paid for your skills
Right.
and you get paid the rate for the job. Well, if you did that, you could really change the actual the economics of the world, couldn't you?
Right.
And if you changed that, it could really change how we are as a society.
Definitely.
Mm.
And there's so many things, like you mentioned, women in Web3, as well as how, from past 3 generations, you've been watching the same issues. It is changed in the micro level, not at the macro level, you would say. But to cater those issues and to see how tech is evolving, right? And to make sure that you evolve with the, let's say, with also focusing on humanity,
Yes.
and not like we talk about sustainable, eco-friendly, all these things, when we talk about tech. But this is very important that you also talk about humanizing the whole process, you know.
Mm.
And when you say humanizing, this comes in social and ethics, plays a major role. And while you see there are a lot of people who can feel amazing about themselves in the metaverse, while they can be anyone, and they can showcase or be, anyone, and they can have a sense of self belief by just going in that world, by just changing that world. And if in that world they can feel secured, I mean, you're doing a great job then. Secured when it comes to social issues and equality, and especially for the women, you know going about all these things and to feel as equals. I mean, it'll be a great start for,
Mm.
the metaverse
But if
society.
And if you think back to how we started about talking about your new baby and talking about my daughter and
Yes.
having her phone stolen, and
Right.
as we described, that's kind of, it's made her feel really exposed and vulnerable because she is her true self to everyone on that phone.
Yes.
She feels much freer on her the end of her phone, presenting and being able to present how she wants, than how she might feel if she was standing in the room here with me now.
Yeah, she
And
can be.
therefore,
Yes.
the metaverse and the tools of Web3 are going to just are making that even more, isn't it? How many women or how many people with disabilities would you meet who would say, actually, through the metaverse, I can present who I truly feel inside
Yes.
versus what I think people see when they look at me.
Right.
And that might be their perception. So I might say when people look at me, they see one thing and inside I feel something else. But that doesn't matter. If I have that difference in feeling, then I'm going to present differently. So if I can go to job interviews online and be all of that safe comfortableness, I'm going to present a very different Alison than if I present in person when I'm then really worried about what people are thinking about me, how they're seeing me, how do I look, all what's their thoughts and thinking. So actually we can make people much freer to be present and actually present who they truly are inside. And sometimes, I mean, we talk about it as unlocking human potential. Because if you
Right.
take away those things, I mean, some people say you're giving people a mask. I'd say you're taking away, actually, the masks that society makes us put on, or the one that society says, I accept people if they look like this. And because society consciously or unconsciously, sometimes that is unconscious, people will meet people and say, "Do you look like me?" And if you do, I will engage with you. But if you don't, I will look at you differently. And that can be an
Right.
unconscious thought. But if you strip all of that away, I have to see you as the person that you're presenting and the skills you're presenting and what you're saying. I actually have to listen more closely, because then I have to really hear what you say rather than assume what you're going to say. Because sometimes when we look at people and we think, oh, they're like me, we go, oh, they're going to think the same as me. So I actually might not listen as closely. We have to
Right.
do all of those things.
Yes. And it's such an important issue. Like when you talk about being pretentious nowadays, like you mentioned, your daughter would be being besides you. She can behave differently according to the people around there, or uh, she cannot express her feelings truly. People might judge. So this is an important issue where I feel the young generation is feeling. I think they lack self belief just because of social media, what we are having right now. And then we will take this into the meta. Okay, so in the social media world, when I talk to people, they lack self belief because they're constantly comparing themselves in the social world with those influencers. And it really it's a very important issue to talk about, because as you go in meta, you are in metaverse, you can wear any mask, or you can have any clothes. And there it's I mean, right now there is, I don't know what the future what holds, because even Gucci and Parada, they are also having these luxury clothing coming in, and then people might want to brag those things, and then the other generation can have social pressures of
Yeah.
doing the same thing. So there are a lot of layers to it, but I see it as very important to break it down and do and take some amazing make some amazing policies here while you're going through the journey. Because if you can create more beautiful opportunities in the metaverse by taking over this issue of equality or these things, I mean, then I would feel we can reach the web 3.0, the whole community and the metaverse. We can drive that to the USP of unwinding ourselves into the
Mm,
metaverse by not getting judged or by not having those things. Because once you create something of value and where you can be your truly self,
mm.
you know
I like
if you
that.
create an
I like
environment.
the
Yes.
USP of the
Yes.
Web3 must be about being our true self.
Yes, if you can just show yourself out, and nobody is going to have those pressures on you, pretentious, all these issues are not there. I
Mm,
mean, this can just upscale the whole community. So that's why when I talk about ethics and social issue, and because of my past, I've seen a lot of my friends in the gaming world, because it's not so different from gaming. In gaming, you are competing. In metaverse, you can compete or you might not compete. You can have a great morning. You can do yoga there. You can do a lot of things. A lot of
yeah.
things there. So, but still, I would say that when you talk about it, and if you can make a lot of lovely policies out there, I mean, I don't know about how this space is evolving right now, and but I know for the fact that if you are here for the longer run and making amazing policies, I mean, the future is beautiful. I mean, it's going to be amazing, because I look up to metaverse as unwinding. I feel that it should be the motto should be unwind yourself. When they say that in after 10 or 10 years from now, you will be spending, an average person would be spending 2 hours in the metaverse, like they say. But that 2 hours has to be not about competition, has to be not about upscaling or something, has to be about unwinding, you know, so that you go to some place, like we go to our religious places, or not religious, I mean, something which gives us
Yeah. We go to
belonging.
that place. we go to that place, as you said. But two things. I mean, I think it would be more than 2 hours. I mean, I think as we move forward, I think people will do lots more than that. Yeah, it might not be solid like a 1 hour or a 2 hour block, but I think people will pop into the metaverse to have those calls with their friends. Will jump into the metaverse to have a call with their family, or to. I mean, somebody yesterday put a post up that their family live around the world, and rather than all flying to one place, they had a party in the metaverse. Yeah, I want to say it's a regular person. This wasn't a big brand, or it wasn't. It was a regular person saying, "Join me in the metaverse." She's like in her 50s, and
Oh,
she
wow.
invited her family
Yeah,
to
this is
come
also a
into the
cool thing. Yeah.
metaverse. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and for me, so they were there, and they said some of that was a bit strange or like new for them, but actually that's just going to happen more and more, isn't it? I mean, artists are saying to people, I mean, even I mean, I've got a collection of NFTs, and I got an
Right.
invitation to set them up into a gallery, where then you can say to people, "Oh, go look at my NFTs if you want." I mean, people can look at them on OpenSeas if they want, but actually, they can now see them in a gallery. So I think people will do more and more things. I mean, people will even learn skills in the meta. I mean, if you think
Yes.
of the gaming world has taught people so many skills. But for me, I hear the bit that you say about the gaming world has some negativities. But if you look at the other parts it has, it really teaches young people teamwork. It can teach young
Definitely.
people, it can teach them how to kind of survive. Yeah,
Right.
it can teach them critical thinking, lateral thinking, loads of those things. So actually, it makes them ideally placed to get employment in the new Web3 world that is
Yes.
evolving. And for me, I think we need to help young people realize they are employable skills rather
Right.
than sitting in their bedroom skills where
Right.
they play, because then we can start to bring them into the metaverse much more than we can bring those who have. I'm going to pick out some kind of Harvard University or Oxford, like
Yes.
those with degrees, yeah, who have.
Yes.
I mean, nowadays, people are saying, young people like in their 20s, they're saying, I don't feel the value of doing a 4-year degree. To do a 4-year degree and have what, 60, 70,000 pounds worth of debt, and
Mm.
actually
Right.
I don't know where that will lead me to, where they might have actually been a gamer and doing university and can see how they can earn more through the skills they've acquired in their gaming world.
Right.
Well, actually, so many other people who have those skills who didn't have the opportunity to go to university, that's where I think the leveling up can happen. People who don't have the opportunity to acquire that academic education, or they have chosen not to, they can come into the Web3 world. And the skills they have are so important. So for me, it's about making sure we help them realize they are employable skills, but also helping employers know they don't need to think of criteria for jobs of, oh, you've got to have a degree just because what? We ask people they've got to have a degree, or what does that show us? Actually, what we want is people who are creative, critical thinkers, can laterally think, can work in teams, have good social skills to communicate with other people. They're the employability skills we need. The actual technique of what we want people to do, as you said, the metaverse is new. No one really knows how to
Where it's
be
going.
in the metaverse. So that's going to be, you can't employ somebody who's got oodles of experience of working in the metaverse because it's new. So therefore, we need to think about, what do we need from people to be on our team to come work? So, and then be much clearer. But I do think people will spend lots more time in the metaverse, in social ways, in work ways. They will do learning in the metaverse, all of those, so that they actually it will be a part of their social life and their work life.
And to add to that, while you were speaking about these things, in India, we are a country of 1.3 billion people and very skilled. They know how the teamwork is like comes to naturally to us. Okay.
Yeah,
And so there are so many people who can get employed and they don't need a degree, and and they are always in that community hub. They do that. In India we have these communities, big communities of different societies, of different opportunities out there. And it's kind of like have you ever been to India?
no.
No. Okay. So it is kind of like a family going on. If you see someone having any issues, we'll just quickly go to that person, help that person, or any those kind of issues. So I feel in India, there are a lot of people who are below poverty line. So for them, it's a very good opportunity.
Yeah,
If they get into the metaverse world and they understand that how can you cater yourself into it. you know when I talk about when I talk about NFTs, I talk about educating the masses. Same with the metaverse. If you are able to talk about it and you can make sure that at least 10 people or 3 people understand the whole concept and try to push them some sort of way in this, they can have a great future by not going to a bigger college or bigger institution. you know they can just be online and they can create amazing values. And that, when I tell this to people in India, it is hard to believe for them. When I started my podcast journey, it was about more about educating the masses, because I know the future is changing and there will be certain kind of obstacles around it. There will be certain kind of beliefs around it, but it is important to understand that we are ever evolving species and we would take our own way and we would evolve, slowly and so. I mean, for India, it is such a big opportunity. I feel having you on the show, I thought that a lot of people should get inspired from you. That how you're taking in your 50s, how your journey began, not from the metaverse world, you know, and how you came. You were in media. I think I was going through your LinkedIn profile. You were into those virtual experiencing companies. I didn't get
yes.
too much into it.
So
So you were
yeah, yeah,
into the
yeah.
virtual reality world, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think I do want to say just one thing back to what you were saying a moment ago around the skill set of, as you say, a country with 1.3 billion. Yeah. But actually, what happens, you have a country with a population with huge skills, but often people will be employed and be paid at rates a lot lower
Yes,
than they would be paid if they were employed in the UK or the US. Now,
definitely.
that comes all the way back to the point of why I got involved in this, because I believe that actually you should be paid for your skill, not for the geography, or based on the
Wow.
geography of where you live.
Wow.
So if we say this skill for this job requires these 5 skills, and this is the salary for that job, and the job can be done from anywhere
Remotely.
in the world, you will change the economics of the world, because people who hold those jobs will be people who have the skills rather than they acquired an academic qualification that helps people see that they could be able to do that. That's where I feel when I say level the playing field, we can really change how we approach things of this nature. And when you change how you employ people and therefore how you distribute finances, you will start to automatically change the dynamics of the world in which we operate in.
Definitely. And like you mentioned, it is all going to be a gig economy. It's
It
changing into
is.
that gig economy.
Yeah.
Uh, just on that point, I was invited by a university as a judge. It was a hackathon. Okay. So I met a lot of interesting young people there. They were making money while they were 17, 16, 18. They were making good amount of money. They were studying, and they always believe that this is already channelized. In India, we are uh, the course or the education is quite difficult. So they're already doing that, as well as they are getting upskilling themselves with different kind of skills. And while I was talking to them, they know certainly that if they have the skills, they have the potential, they don't need to work themselves for any company. They can do freelance, or
Yeah.
they can just be at their homes doing whatever they want to do. And it is also important for them to not be, let's say, not be dependent on someone, because these big
Yes.
companies and organizations can grill you in a very different zone. If you have skills, if you have good skill set, and there are no time foundations, you just need to make sure that you finish your work. There's no login log off issues and all. I mean, there are a lot of things we can differently do, especially in a country like India.
But that requires so many different ways to look at employment, doesn't it? I mean, you've just said like log in, log off. How many companies are still working on that mentality because it's what they were brought up on, that you have to see people to be able to see them doing the job. Yeah.
Right.
So actually, I mean, the masses was you've got to bring everybody to one place because then I know you're doing the job that I'm employing you for.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we are moving away from that, but let's not delude ourselves that we've really moved away from that. We are shifting from that, and COVID made us shift from that because
Oh yeah.
employers had to start saying, "Oh, we can all be distributed at home, and I can still trust you." But there is still a kind of drawing back into the offices. I mean, I'm in the UK, and so when I go into London now, and I don't have to go into London for a job, but if I go there to meet people or to go to a meeting, sometimes people are being drawn back into their offices. Yeah. So we need to kind of take a check of ourselves. COVID gave us an opportunity to break that thought
Right.
process, but we're at danger of slipping back into it because actually we need people to go back to London because we need the small businesses in London to survive, and they
Right.
survived because of the people working in London. So there's so
Right.
many things of society that have got to change. But I do want to pick up the point about the gig economy, which you can say is brilliant, amazing. You can work, but actually, I think there's going to be different issues. And I wonder if that links more to us talking more about mental health in the metaverse. Because when you worked for one person, even if you didn't like the culture or that you had to go in or you had to log in, log off, you kind of knew where your staple income was going to come from.
Right.
You did know that I'm going to have that. And for some people, that might have even meant that they knew how to plan for their retirement
Yes.
or a period in which they might not work. Let's not talk about retirement because I think people don't get to retire anymore. It's like, but in that future where they might not work in the same way, where actually, so if you've got a gig economy, you actually have to have a lot of jobs. Some young people, some people in their 20s and 30s will have firstly many careers. They will constantly change. They will also sometimes have several jobs. And
Right.
if you have several jobs, sometimes, now I don't know about you, but if when I was in my 20s and I was struggling to make ends meet, I didn't pay a pension for a number of years because I was just like, oh, I can't afford to pay my pension. I'm going to pay my mortgage or to live,
Okay.
to
Right.
pay my rent. And so actually, now I'm this old, I've actually got a deficit in a pension because I
Okay.
didn't pay it then. So if we move to
Mm.
this gig economy where people have lots of jobs, we've really got to do something to help people understand that at one point they might not work as much, in whether we call that retirement, working differently, but they need to think about saving for that time in their life, because it will all change. Our life was based on, we worked, we paid a pension, and then we stopped working, and then we had an income. Where if people don't work in that way, we've also got to address that issue. It's a boring one, but we've got to think about, how do we help people think about that? So all those young people doing hackathons, how many of them were putting aside a certain amount of that money, so that then when they got to 60 or 70 and they didn't want to work as much, that they didn't have to.
That's a very important question or thing to address, as well as while you were talking about this, I this is kind of a flow chart which I believe with my clients, or with I believe with the people, especially the youth. Like, I tell them that right now personal branding, content creation, freelancing, okay, all these things will go hand in hand. Then when I talk to them about financing, or talking about, now you've made your money, and now you see a lot of financial coaches out there who are trying to talk about your retirement, or you might have seen a lot of videos, retiring at 30, retiring at 35, retiring at 40. So how they're doing that, they are, I mean, especially the youth is really smart nowadays, that they know that this is the certain amount of money, and because I'm freelancing, I'm not dependent on someone, and I meet so many people, and they're like, yeah, I have to just work for 5 more years. I was like, are you sure that you work for 5 more years? Yeah, this is what I'm doing. And this street smart for financing, and obviously they know the, because of cryptos also coming in, there are so many adverse things happening there, but still, I mean, when that's the whole flow chart, personal branding, content creation,
Yeah,
then financing those things,
yeah,
and then leveraging it out, as well as retiring means you are still actively talking and making connections, you know
yes.
like you
But it is a minority, isn't it? I mean, there are. I know there's been a lot of money made in this world,
Hmm.
but we're still talking about a smaller number of people who are
Yes,
been able to make a lot of money, and think about, I only have to do this for 5 more years, and then I've got enough money, or I've bought enough houses, or I've found a way to secure my money. But the majority of people, that's a kind of aspiration, a dream. And what we
you're
need
right.
to do is to make sure that those who live like that can really think about all that you've said and packaged together, but that everyone else who doesn't hasn't been able to do that, and it could just be because they weren't in the right place at the right time to do some of that. That's not to undermine someone's skills, but actually the majority of people won't. The majority of people will take 3, 4, 5 jobs, just regular jobs, freelancing, to work and earn enough. And therefore, that will be more difficult for them to think about, how do I save for the future? And we all need to save for the future. Even if we say we're going to work for our whole life, we're never going to retire, there will be a time, you will
It
have the next
happens.
20 years of being exhausted with a small child, and then growing up. And then eventually you will say, I'm going to do it slightly less. And you'll need to be able to fund that lifestyle that you want then,
Definitely.
as you do now. But
Yes,
maybe that's
definitely.
because you're talking to a 50-year-old, so we're having this
No,
conversation.
that's
Maybe,
really a good
maybe past 20.
wise advice. You giving a very wise advice, because as I am quite bullish on certain things, as well as I also take a back seat now. I'm also into taking, I believe, how can I handle adverse and uncertainty, when I'm taking any decision now, I'm always thinking in that part right now, that things are not going to be the same.
Yeah.
This too shall pass. There's some kind of things which I write daily in my diary. You are happy, this too shall pass. You are not, you feeling frustrated, this too shall pass. So we know for the fact that things are not going to be the same. Maybe I am not able to do more work like right now I'm doing. 10 years from now, and I would
Yep.
want to change everything.
Exactly.
I don't want to work in metaverse then. I
Yeah.
want to take go and just do farming, because I would get irritated
Exactly.
about this digital world. So then also there, I should be able to live happily or have necessity to me while catering to that farm or there.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It's
I
about
understand.
recognizing how it is today will always be different. If we just say that to ourselves, how it is today will always be different in the future. And if it's
Yeah,
going to be different, we need to be just thinking about how we will personally manage that difference and what we
right.
will do. And I think in terms of like Gen Z and Gen Z, yeah, so the newborns and that now, I mean, they are going to enter a whole new world that I didn't even know existed. Yeah. And therefore, we as older people, I think the greater challenge here is for the older generation to be really equipping themselves with the understanding of what the new world that our children are going to grow into will look and feel like, so that then we don't become judgmental on the world they live in. Actually, we embrace it. And I think that's the most important thing. My role as an older person is to say, actually, all weekend I've been with people, and everything they've said to me all weekend is, what is Web3? What is Web3? What is
Mm,
Web3? Yeah.
mm.
And many of them were younger than me. And I was shocked. I actually thought some of those would have
Knows a
known
lot.
a lot more. And they're
Yeah.
like, what is all this Web3? Like, what does it mean?
Mm,
And actually, when we live in a society, we have a responsibility to be thinking about what's the future, isn't it? Because if we're
mm,
not, and we are the teachers of we are the teachers of the young, or we are the people who are doing podcasts, so we're informing the next generation. If we're not inquisitive about the future, how are we going to help them move into that world? So I think it is definitely, for me, older people, everybody needs to be much more mindful of the future, and that the future holds many things that they can't even comprehend. I never thought I'd go into a digital museum,
yes.
or into a
Mm,
digital virtual library, or into a virtual bank. Yeah, I sent you some
yes.
images, and I purposely went around lots of different locations
Okay.
in Decentraland and that, so that you could have, so that I could see and touch and feel.
Understand.
And it's really alien to me, but I have to do that to help to be much more mindful of what my daughter or other
Yes.
generations are going to be doing.
Yes. This is a wonderful some key points. I should have a diary and I should write these down, because yeah, one thing you mentioned, being responsible for the future generations, which is a really key point here. Second thing is that we humans are always trying to invent new things, and we always want to change our surroundings all the time because we want new things, as we say. And like when any shift happens, it is important for people like us to be responsible, because if we won't, then our young generation or Gen Zs, whatever you call it, they would have a lot of issues. They would have big issues, not what you had in your 20s. They'll have several big, humongous issues,
Yeah.
because when you talk about uh, insecurity, anxiety, mental health, right now, they are not able to even think highly of themselves. just because of these things. So if we don't cater to those situations or things, we might not be able to doing we might not do justice
Yeah.
to being here on this planet. I mean, there is something important that we should pass to, our younger generations. So
Yeah.
yeah, very good point.
And it is about, yes, we are here to make sure that we are healthy and live the life that we want to live. But that also means building a society that we can feel comfortable and proud to pass to the next generation to
Right.
come forward. And and therefore, if we are not thinking of the future, we won't be like taking care of the next generation, because
Definitely.
they aren't going to live in my world that I lived in and the works that the jobs I did. They're going to live in a new world, and so I have a responsibility to them to understand it, to help shape it, and to make sure it is as enabling and as empowering and as equal, for all of them. And that for me
Definitely.
is my priority.
Yes, and like you are even a parent, so knowing what your child can go into, and knowing that a lot of parents, they're not tech savvy, and in India they don't rely too much on technology and all. So for them, they don't know what their child is doing on the phone all the
Mm,
time. They don't know that, and it is important as a parent to realize that you understand, or if you're not working in web 3.0, you at least have a knowledge of knack of how it's going, how it's shaping,
mm.
so that you should have a lot of like, you can cater to those problems if your child
Yeah.
someone faces.
And
And
it's silly, isn't it? As we grow up, we forget the struggles that we had. So
yes,
when we grew up, or when I grew up, people would have said, "What do you mean? Why are you talking to people on the phone, on a landline, not a mobile, on a landline? Go see them." And that generation didn't understand my generation of how we would be on the phone, and then my generation doesn't always understand the next generation who have built their life around Facebook and then the different social medias, and then how that generation isn't going to understand the next one, who are going to be living in the metaverse. They are going to be bringing together their physical and their virtual world into one, and they will be comfortable with that. And therefore, if we want to engage with them, we need to understand what that world is. And that's why, again, I think it's all of our responsibility to actually look at it, play with it, and
and
shape it.
right. And also, wanted to ask you, what is the goal focus of Meta Campus, and how do you take yourself? How do you want to? I know personally how you are catering to it. How you taking ethics and social issue, but when you say Meta Campus, what should people derive from it? What should they think about it?
Yeah, cool. No, that's a really great question. Thank you. So, for me, Meta Campus is about um, helping people move into Web3. So
Okay.
we believe Web3 is a valuable tool to do all the things that we've talked about, equalize
Right.
society, to change people. And we feel that it can therefore unlock potential. So when
Right.
people think about us as we go forward, I want people to think about, oh, I can reach out to Metacampus because they can come and help me learn and transition from Web 2 to Web 3 in a
Right.
way that is
Okay.
personalized. I want to reach out to Metacampus because, do you know what? I'm a founder and I've got a really great idea, and I want
Okay.
to be introduced to some possible investors. Or I want them to reach out to Metacampus to say, I am a real expert in my field, and actually I want to partner with Metacampus to come and share that knowledge with others. Or actually, I know someone who is also a real expert, so I want to introduce Metacampus to them so they can utilize them on helping people learn. We want to bring in real life learning to people to transition into Web3 by also giving people in real life experiences. So it's no good learning all of the concepts about the metaverse, Web3, crypto, NFTs, any word that you can think of, if you don't also at the same time build experience of working with those. So that what we're doing is building that learning journey, which gives people the in real life knowledge gain, but also the experience to work with other people whilst they're learning, to actually be able to then say to employers, oh yeah, here's evidence of my work. Here you can see how I helped a company do this in the metaverse. How I helped them develop a marketing strategy or deployed a marketing strategy. It could be any topic possible, but I helped a company. So we want to give people that in real life experience so that they can use it as tangible evidence of their ability to be and work in Web3.